This piece of furniture is haunted or cursed. I don't know which, but I can't explain what happened. You'll have to bear with me because some of the details are cloudier than others. I don't even know how to start telling you about it, but I need to. Don't know where it came from, but I have a hard time saying no to free furniture. I've never worked on a MENGEL piece of furniture before, and a bit of research was in order. The MENGEL Furniture Company was formed sometime during the American Civil War in Louisville, Kentucky by C.C. MENGEL. During their time in business, they produced wooden washing machines and car components. Following World War II, they started manufacturing doors and windows. During this time, they also built a popular line of home furnishings, and in 1956 they were purchased by Kroller Manufacturing, who slowly eliminated their line of furniture. I have no idea who dropped this dresser off at my house. One thing was clear, and that was that someone had tried to fix this piece before it was left at my doorstep. The black paint was definitely not original, and there was wood filler all over the body that had large gaps, especially in the top. The original finish was peeking through, and it seemed to be an old blonde finish. The back of the piece had some creepy smiley face burned into it, and next to it was the manufacturing date of July 19th, 1948, making this dresser 73 years old at the time of this video. I began with removing the drawers and the hardware. When I pulled out the first drawer, I noticed it looked like something had spilled inside it and ruined the entire oak ply drawer bottoms. I continued on and I found really unusual items. It's not uncommon to find things inside of old furniture, but these were a bit too much. One of the first things that I found was an old looking bottle. It was weird because it looked like some sort of ordnance device, but I saw a cork on the top, and so when I decided to open it, I poured it out and it smelled like really strong rum. I'm not sure what that's all about, but it was just really odd. In the entire dresser, I found a brown glass jar filled with old keys, a book that looked like a reprint from the 1950s, a quarter, the weird rum container, and a note, which is the most bizarre thing in this entire dresser. It took me about 2 days to get over what I'd found and decide that I needed to finish this project. Someone probably had a really strange sense of humor. At least that's what I told myself. I started from the bottom and I worked my way up on the dresser, making repairs. The first thing I fixed was the base of the dresser. It was glued back together using insulation foam, and I removed that and re-glued the pieces back together correctly. The right side of the dresser had a large gap that was filled with wood filler. Whoever tried to make these repairs seemed very desperate to put it back together in one piece. I cleared out as much wood filler as I could, and then I glued and clamped the sides together. The dresser was made out of solid oak, minus the drawer separators, drawer bottoms, and the back. This might explain why the joints separated. Over time, as the wood expands and contracts, this can happen. Who knows where this dresser was stored over its lifetime, or what it's seen, but it's definitely seen a lot. The repairs on this piece are never ending. I really should have just built a new dresser from scratch, but I kept thinking about that note. I kept thinking I needed to do this. I spent several hours removing stripped screws out of the top to take it off and re-glue it, only to have the back piece of oak get stuck. There were 2 screws hidden behind the very secure backer board that if I removed, it would have damaged and not been able to be put back since it was glued and nailed to the back. At some point, I remember coming out to the garage and that piece of oak was off. I don't know how or when, but it was just sitting there next to the top. And the additional problem with this now was when I laid the boards down to reglue them all together, that plan was quickly shattered by the fact that the boards had warped and no longer fit together snugly. Fixing this even with a planer or a table saw would not have been ideal because the amount of wood that would have had to come off of the top would have made it too small to properly cover the entire dresser opening, which means we need to get a new top. I decided to tackle the drawer bottoms next. I knew they needed to be replaced based on the extent of damage on the inside of all 4 drawers. I've never ever had to replace all 4 drawer bottoms on a piece, ever. 1 or 2, but never all of them. As I was taking the drawer bottoms apart, some of the sliders were cracked in half already, and so when I removed them from the bottom, they ended up fully disassembling or coming apart. At this point, I'm starting to feel like no matter what I do, more things keep going wrong. At this point in the project, I took a break, and I seriously contemplating using this dresser for firewood. The very next morning, it started raining outside, and then water started leaking into my garage. Now, I'm not much on taking things as signs, but this was just really coincidental. I guess if it motivated me to continue, then that's a positive, right? Anyways, the next thing I started doing was stripping the old paint and the original finish off the body of the dresser and the drawers. I scraped the stripper off, which included layers of wood filler placed on top of black latex paint and blonde lacquer finish. I used mineral spirits with steel wool to neutralize, and then I came back in with my carbide scraper to get the more difficult areas. I ended up sanding everything down using 120 grit sandpaper to get any of that remaining finish off and to smooth things out. This is a solid wood piece, so there isn't veneer to go through. There were details on the drawer areas that did need to be hand sanded, which are the curves around the perimeter. I went to the hardware store and had them pre-cut me some underlayment board to fit into all 4 of the drawer bottoms. These were the only boards with the correct thickness and strength that they had that I could use. Unfortunately, the quality of the boards they had were not great, so I ended up placing the uglier sides of the boards facing the drawer bottoms. After sliding the bottom board back into the drawers, I placed a light coating of glue into the dovetails, and then I secured the back boards of the drawers. I reattached the sliders using wood glue. I placed a flat board on top of them to evenly distribute pressure, and then I added a weight. This pressed the slider firmly against the drawer bottom. Clamps could be used for this as well, I just didn't own any reasonably sized clamps for this. Once everything was dry, I came back and removed all of the clamps on the drawers the next day, and found another surprise. All I can think is this has to be some sort of joke or trick, but I don't know. A drawer slider was also missing from the inside of the dresser. I cut out a new one using a square dowel, and then I used a chisel and my hobby miter box to cut it so that it would slide inside the drawer properly. When I went to the hardware store to get drawer bottoms, I also purchased a new top for the dresser. I did not buy a solid oak top. I bought oak plywood that I had pre-cut at the hardware store. This was the easier option to pick, and it will hold up for years on this piece. Plus, the grain pattern on the top was really cool. I attached the top to the base of the dresser using L brackets, 2 on the left, 2 on the right, and 3 on the back. This thing is not coming off. Because I chose to use oak plywood to hide the sides, I ended up grabbing some iron-on red oak veneer, and all you have to do is cut it to size for each side, and I ended up using painter's tape to hold the end pieces in place, and you use a hot iron on the veneer until you see the glue start to squeeze out of the sides. You can use foil if you think you're going to burn the wood. I went from strong feelings of wanting to turn this dresser into firewood to feeling like maybe it can be something. Inspired by those feelings, I chose to use General Finish's black stain to give it a burned, darkened oak look. In addition to the black stain, I felt like this square box of a dresser needed something more. I ended up grabbing my Behr chalk paint in the color Black Evergreen to add a lucky number 7 to the sides. I ended up lightly sanding the chalk paint before sealing everything in with Varathane's oil-based satin finish. For the handles, I stripped them down using Citrus Strip, and then I used Rust-Oleum metallic paint and primer in satin bronze. I applied 2 coats, and then I used a clear sealer over the back and the front. I cut out 2 supporting pieces using some oak that I had on hand, and I attached them to the legs for extra support. I also replaced the old metal feet that were rusty with nylon furniture tacks. The drawer separators for the top drawer were nowhere to be found, so I cut out 2 new pieces and slid them into the existing slots. I used Howard Sweden wax on the drawer sliders and moisturized the wood in the drawers using some orange glow. Before I show you what it looks like in the end, take a look at what this dresser looked like when it was manufactured. Where it was before we started, and finally, here's what it looks like. This project isn't one I ever want to do again. I still think the thing is cursed and hope that with its new life it can go haunt someone else's nightmares. Be sure to go check out the other Halloween Challenge participants using the playlist linked in the description box below.